Hey everyone, my name is Japanese Import. I've been here at Skillcapped for a few years now, but even before making guides, I've been playing League of Legends for a long time. I started in Season 3 and first hit high ELO in Season 5. And since then, I've had the pleasure of not only playing in competitive with, but also coaching tons of really great players. I spent the majority of the last decade working on my coaching and trying to understand the game to the highest level that I possibly can. And in doing so, I've really kind of seen it all. I've got thousands of hours coaching every role in the game and have had hundreds of students climb ranks that they never thought possible. I work with not only pros, but also people that are just starting out, and everywhere in between. Due to this, I have the unique perspective of really getting to see a huge array of players, and I've gotten to understand the struggles that everyone of every rank seems to go through when it comes to learning this incredibly deep and complex game that we sometimes enjoy. Whether you're in Grandmaster trying to push for Challenger, or you're literally brand new loading into the game for the first time, we'll have some advice for you. Today, I wanted to go through each rank and break down the most important things that I think will help you take your game to the next level as an ADC. While we will give specific advice for each rank, make sure not to just skip to the division that you're in, since all of these concepts really build on each other, and everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. For example, even if you're in Plat, you might be missing the puzzle pieces that we're going to be talking about in Silver. And of course, it goes without saying, the fastest way to climb and get the rank you've always wanted is to use our hyper improvement system at skillcapped.com. We take the highest priority skills you need to learn to climb ranks fast, such as wave control, and then break it down into a step-by-step course of bite-sized 1 to 2 minute videos that are easy to understand. So while you wait for your next game to start, you can learn freezing, fast pushing, slow pushing, bouncing waves, the list goes on, all in just a few minutes to maximize your improvement rate. These courses have been getting 5-star ratings from all of our users, raving at how helpful they are. That's not all though, as every week we release 10 brand new Smurf commentaries where a challenger player teaches you how to climb out of the exact rank you're stuck in. If you're looking for something more personal instead, then we've got you covered with one-on-one coaching from our trained challenger experts. All of this seemed too good to be true? Well, don't worry. We're backed by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using Skillcapped, then you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and get the rank you've always wanted. Alright, now let's get into his guide. We first find ourselves in Iron and Bronze. For many, this is what it feels like to start climbing a mountain from the very bottom. With seemingly so much to learn and very little sense of direction, it can feel overwhelming, which is why we want to break the game down into its simplest form and really hone in on one idea: understanding your specific role's strengths and weaknesses. ADC in general is largely agreed upon to have the weakest early game impact, but also the largest late game power when compared to other roles. This doesn't mean that we should think that we can't win lane or can't carry early game, because that's not true at all, and we'll get to that later. But in general, we should recognize that we scale very well into the game and will have exponentially more impact as our character grows stronger. The two main currencies to achieve this in League are experience and gold. Of course, experience is valuable for every champion, but being bot lane, we have to share for a large part of the time with our laning counterpart. Because of this, you can't really rely on being overleveled in most of your games. In fact, you're probably going to be under the average level of the game, which isn't a problem as long as you can get the other resource consistently. And this is really what ADC is all about. It's just all about the gold. You scale the best with items in the entire game. Our aim as a carry isn't to have the game drag out to late game, rather we really just want to reach our item spikes as fast as we possibly can ahead of the other people, which means we need to generate gold, and we need to make sure we can do it every game. While kills, assists, towers, and other objectives may contribute to your income, you're not going to get these every single game. And plenty of low ELO ADC players lose out on income just because they're focused on the wrong things. We need to be as consistent as we possibly can. There are two main ideas that we can use as a sort of umbrella when it comes to this. One, getting the CS that's in front of you, and two, actually being there for CS. Right now, let's just focus on the first. Getting the CS in front of you is just last hitting and actually earning the gold for killing each minion. This can be tough for newer players, especially in certain situations, but it's literally the best thing you can practice. Not only is it the most important fundamental to learn, but it's something you will literally be doing all game, every game. So if you're paying attention to it, you're bound to get much better at it pretty quickly. For example, one of the best things you can practice early on and devote a lot of time to is last hitting under tower. You're going to be spending a lot of time being pushed in or just catching waves. And we need to make sure we don't just miss over half the gold that's being funneled into us, just because we didn't practice this. In any case, there's a ton of ways to improve at last hitting out there, but if you want a comprehensive list of every single tip to get better at last hitting every minion, check out our Master in Minutes on our website, which will teach you everything you need to know, and go way more in depth on the specifics about how to actually do this. As an example of a quick CSing under tower tip, if you get closer to minions, your projectile will instantly reach that minion, making last hitting much more consistent as you can cut out the travel time delay of your auto. While turret damage and minion health is predictable and something we should learn, it often gets overlooked by lower level players. And because of this, at high levels of play, you'll see ADCs prep minions and almost formulaically set up their waves as they reach the tower. While in low elo, you'll see players scrambling to get CS, often not prepping minions for the tower shots to help them, and sometimes doing too much damage so that minions die to the tower. While these situations are intuitive with time, what's less intuitive is actually maximizing the amount of time we are close enough to minions to kill them. There are a few things to look out for here that will absolutely ruin your farm, even if you do know how to get everything that is in front of you. Which brings us to silver. As a continuation of getting more gold, we need to start incorporating some other aspects of play. The first of these key things is deciding when to leave lane. Obviously, we're going to need to leave lane for a multitude of reasons: recalling, participating in fights, and doing other things across the map. But there is an ideal time to do that. There are really three kinds of wave states when you break it down simply. Neutral waves, like the ones you'll see at the beginning of each game, pushing waves that are moving towards your opponent's tower, and frozen waves that are moving towards your own tower. You'll learn to identify more complicated scenarios as you play more, but for now, focus on trying to figure out what each one of your waves categorizes as out of these three. Just like before, if you want more in-depth specifics on each of these things, make sure to check out our Master in Minutes, which covers each of these topics in depth. As a general rule of thumb, you do not want to leave lane when the wave is pushing away from you, as this will mean that your opponents can come back to find a minion wave built up at their tower while you lose all of your golden XP. We can see examples of challenger players actively abusing this idea, like here where Jhin identifies that the wave is pushing back to him and thus feels fine to move towards a fight. When Varus gets baited and leaves as well for a similar amount of time, he ends up missing much more, while Jhin gets to have a big wave that he can farm under his tower when he gets back. Using this will let you impact the map and actually start doing things without having it be a huge detriment on your farm total. So if you are wondering how pro players get crazy amounts of CS while still, doing things, this is part of it. On top of this idea, making sure to recall only when you've crashed a wave into the enemy's tower or when you have a wave freezing into you will minimize the amount of farm that you lose. Avoiding excessive trading that forces you to lose a lot of health and give up waves because you have to base is also something to keep in mind. If you find yourself having to go back to base often, or you're just dying and notice that farm is being denied to your tower a lot, this is probably the cause of it. It's okay to give up CS if it's going to cost you a lot of health or other resources to get it. At the end of the day, staying in lane for longer is often going to net you more gold in the long run than the immediate benefit of getting one CS that's right in front of you outside of relative safety. I see tons of players have a huge wave coming towards their tower, and then they decide to trade only to get too low to catch any of the minions that they were waiting on. Try not to trade it if you aren't going to be able to recall soon. It's important now that you begin to think about when you're choosing to use your health and mana, and make sure not to find yourself locked into lane with no resources. You're not always going to be able to get ideal recall timings and perfect trades, but it's good to know that they could be a reason why your CS average is a little lower than you'd like. At the end of the day, a good goal to aim for is 6 to 7 CS per minute for this ELO. Pros will be getting upwards of 10 and will eventually get there, but there isn't really a right number when it comes to how much farm you should have. If you're much lower than this though, you should try and figure out what amongst these points is your biggest area of weakness and work on fixing it. Aside from this, we want to start building other fundamentals. We have a lot of time to ingrain good habits, but also bad ones, so we need to make sure that we're starting off on the right foot. The first thing to do is to make sure you get orb walking down to an automatic habit. The difference between inputting an auto attack and taking your hands off the keyboard is massive when compared to auto attacking and immediately inputting a movement command right after. You'll lose out on tons of damage and find yourself unable to chase and run from targets while doing damage, which if you're an ADC is literally the most important part of fighting. Situations like this are only possible if you're moving right after autos. Otherwise, Varus would have been able to walk out of range and Trist wouldn't get the kill here, being unable to reset her jump. Force yourself to use and get comfortable with these other game mechanics as much as you can. ADC more than any other role is reliant on your APM and how efficient you are with clicks. These will all improve your efficiency and consistency. A-clicking, target champions only, unlocked camera, F keys, and activatable items. These are all imperative if you want to climb in this game, and if you don't start now, you're just going to have to come back and relearn it all later. Do yourself a huge favor and start now so that when you do rank up, you can focus on the other stuff. Speaking of which, once you're out of silver, you will find yourself in gold. This is where the average rank player will place their first big goal, and to get out, we need to start doing some optimizations. Once you're consistently getting income, you're probably going to have a lead over your opponents more often than not, but we need to know how to actually turn this into something. Let's focus on two ideas here, the idea of tempo and team fighting. Throughout the game and in laning, you're never truly going to be winning at every single stage, even if you're getting kills on your opponent and going up farm. And this is really due to how we actually get stronger in League. If we told you to imagine the power curve of a champion throughout a game, you might imagine a sort of linear graph where you get stronger over time. If your opponent is weaker than you, you also might imagine that this is kind of how their power curve might look when compared to yours. This sort of visualization is right on average, but also completely wrong. If you think about what makes you stronger in a game, it's usually a purchase of an item, leveling up, unlocking a new ability, etc. And these spikes do not occur in a linear fashion, rather they occur instantaneously and then cease altogether, creating a graph that really looks like this. Even if you feel as though you're stronger than your opponent, there will be times where they just overtake your strength sometimes due to just how the game functions. This is most commonly going to occur after someone's death. Right before dying, someone will usually be low on health and have gold to spend. And then upon death, they immediately heal to full and spend all of their gold, which equals gaining a lot of strength all at once. Basically, your opponent can go from being in an incredibly weakened state to stronger than you instantly, even if you do have more total gold than them, and we need to play around that to avoid throws. Let's follow along with a replay so we can see how this sort of problem arises. Throughout the early lane, Xayah and Ashe do quite well for themselves. They dodge a level 2 Volibear gank, bully out the enemy ADC, and chunk out Ashe as well to the point that all their opponent can do is really sit under tower and await help. Essentially, they've been in the driver's seat this whole lane and should feel like they're winning. However, the second that their Shaco dives the tower and kills Ashe, we need to be aware of how this dynamic will shift. While Ashe will miss farm and XP to the tower now, she is going to come back as strong as possible, having spent all of her gold and will be at full HP. So we need to already be thinking about how we're going to deal with that. A really good thing to start doing now is to just ask yourself a question during the game of what are my advantages and disadvantages? We could come to the conclusion pretty easily that we likely have an XP lead at this point, but we are down in health and items. The easiest thing to do to fix both of these things is to start setting up a good recall timing, as we could buy items and heal to full, fixing both. Like we mentioned earlier, a great time to base is when you push in a wave to the enemy's tower, so that could be our new goal. We could immediately aim to push in the wave that's just now arriving and then look to recall. And this way, we would be able to offset Ashe's advantages and not give her a period of time where she is much stronger than us in the lane. This is the general idea of tempo, staying ahead of your opponents and keeping track of why you're winning so that you never lose control. And it's one of the main reasons why games don't feel clean in lower ELOs. In this game, you'll see that they shove the wave, but then fail to identify that Ashe has 2 extra longswords as well as full health. Of course, because they're lacking in resources now, Ashe can easily set up for a gank bottom, and Xayah's big early lead is suddenly thrown away. When trying to figure out what to do to fix a problem, it's a good idea to keep in mind that you really only have time to do one action after getting a kill, or forcing someone to base early on in the game. This action can vary between a lot of things, like hitting a plate, recalling, roaming, or helping on a neutral objective like Dragon. A plate can help you generate more gold, which can help solve issues, or create advantages by allowing you to buy items earlier than normal. However, most of the time, you're going to want to consider that by doing anything that's not recalling, you're often not going to be able to compete in power with your opponents until you can find a time to go back to base. So if you do choose to do something else like Dragon, don't overdo it and take a fight right after, or you will find yourself throwing. The most common thing is that laners will stay to hit plates and then continue laning as though they're still winning, even though they haven't cashed out on any of the gold that they just gained. So before you want to stay in lane, just ask yourself if you'll still be able to win or recall after you do. In addition to this idea, we need to actually start paying a lot of attention to how we're playing fights. Of course, it's great to generate gold and have item advantage, but you're a squishy carry and you can still very easily die even with a ton of items. You didn't really need to know a ton about positioning until now, as the people you've been playing against will probably not punish your small errors. But now there are a few golden rules that you should follow for a bit in order to increase your consistency. 1, we want to make sure that a fight is almost always front to back. And 2, try to maintain close to your maximum range when you hit a target. We talked a little bit about orb walking before, but now it's time to put that to use. Front to back teamfighting means that targets will only appear on one side so that you can easily choose to hit what's in front of you. If we don't position in this way, we will often have to deal with flanks and people coming from multiple angles. This is an ADC's worst nightmare, as most of your champions just don't have a tool to deal with this situation. A lot of times, ADCs feel like they always have to deal damage, but this is where we have to realize it's okay to not do damage if you're going to die for it. You should prioritize your own safety 9 times out of 10, since a dead carry isn't going to do any damage at all anyways. Our second point of trying to maintain close to max range will also help keep targets at bay from diving onto you. Even if you do position well in a front-to-back teamfight, you're not going to stand any sort of chance in melee range against a lot of bruisers or assassins. Once again, we should prioritize individual safety, and only once we feel our position is secure should we choose to do damage. Of course, as we get better at identifying what sorts of threats exist to our character, we can start to take more complex fights. Our Challenger Expert 6AX dives in here, but only after he's identified that Fiddlestick's ultimate is uncastable and other Q cooldowns are unavailable for the enemy team. Now he can essentially try and melee range so that his opponents can't escape. But again, this sort of play only happens once he's identified that there isn't any risk to himself. Start with the basic rules, and then over time, you'll learn when to break them. I think it's important to stress that it's fine to try things out and sometimes die miserably for it. The whole goal of improvement is to put yourself in situations to learn so that you can get better. And when things do sometimes work out, you'll start to recognize the situations where you can make game-winning plays. However, there's a big difference in knowing that you're doing something potentially dangerous for high reward versus just not realizing it altogether and ending. At this point, you'll start to have a pretty good grasp on your individual autonomy in a game, but now we need to move on to greener pastures. Working with your team. In Plat, we really need to start thinking about coordinating with our teammates. Up until this point, being individually better than your opponents really just will carry every game. Challenger players can go Smurf in gold and below and almost never lose, since they'll just rarely make individual mistakes while at the same time hard punishing their opponents. You should have enough individual fundamentals down that we can start devoting brain power towards watching other things. At this point, you can't truly 1v5 a game like you could before. And we need to start really trying to create synergy with our teammates so we have people to work with. First, starting with your support. Before, the enemy ADC and support will have had bad enough positioning that even in a lane that is essentially a 1v2, you would be able to find opportunities to trade just one-on-one and still win on your own. These opportunities are going to get fewer and fewer now, so we need to start obeying the rules of the bot lane triangle. Essentially, this just means to pay close attention to where your support is when trading in lane, as well as where your opponents are. What you're looking for is a short period of time where you can create a 2v1 in your favor due to small spacing errors in your opponent's play. There are going to be tons of times where an opponent walks slightly too far forward while their teammate walks backwards, and these are the tiny timing windows that we really need to start capitalizing on in order to create a lead in lane. The important thing for you is to not walk up to a 1v2 if your support is very far away. Obviously, if your opponents make a spacing error as well and you can win a 1v1, go for it. Even if your support is right next to you, there are also going to be positions where they might not be very useful to no fault of their own. For example, when a wave is pushed into tower, melee supports aren't going to be able to do much, which can leave you extremely vulnerable if you try to fight there. We can't control how our support is going to play, but we can control the follow-up that we give them and the positions that we put ourselves in. If they move forward to start to pressure, it's important to also walk forward so that your support won't make a play without you. A lot of players in this ELO start to complain that their support is just inting, but in reality, it can often be that the synergy between the two of you is what's creating the issue. And that's a fixable problem with just you changing your play. If they don't walk forward, avoid also trying to trade, and if they walk forward, try to follow. The thing to keep in mind here is that by reacting to your support, you always have the final say in what plays you do and don't make. You're never going to be in a high pressure situation where your support has to react perfectly to follow your play. You just don't want to find yourself in that spot, so avoid situations where you are first into plays and need follow-up. You can often just wait for your opponents to mess up, and this puts a lot of burden off your support to play perfectly, which we all know they aren't going to do. On top of this, we really need to start considering our team as a whole. Not only should we start paying a lot of attention to how our jungler is pathing so that we can avoid putting our lane in bad spots when they aren't on bot side, but we can also start prepping our waves so that we have priority while they want to invade or contest crab. Team synergy is going to get more and more important from this point forward, and making sure that our jungler has things to do on bot side will help us not only get more ganks, but also be able to be involved in more things so that all of the plays aren't happening on topside where we just can't participate. Outside of lane especially, we need to be careful when trying to collect farm, especially without vision or without team, as this can lead to a lot of picks. A lot of players will get overconfident here and into diamond as well, where they will overextend and try to outplay once they're strong, even though their team is not anywhere close to them. The same principles of making sure your support is close enough to follow up also applies to your whole team, so just make sure you aren't the one going way ahead of everyone when trying to siege a tower. Your teammates will thank you for all the ints you don't make. Finally, at this point, you're going to reach diamond. It may seem like a promised land, but to many, they don't want their journey to end here. So how do we keep going? This is where we need to start really flipping the idea that ADC is weak early on its head, and start figuring out how to really impact the map as much as we can. Now that you can win lane, it's time to start winning the map. Let's watch a pro game example to see how ADC map movements can completely change a game. Watch SK's bot lane here as they push in bot lane after winning an exchange. This allows them to force their opponents to come back bot to fix their waves as they run towards mid lane to pressure right on Herald's spawn. Because they see the bot lane farming their wave, Lucian is now fine to go back bottom to catch the wave at his tower. But this does mean that they overload mid momentarily so that they can get mid prio and immediately take the Rift Herald without any contest. Something as simple as getting prio into putting pressure on the map only for an instant allows for huge map wins like this to take place. It's often not enough to just go up kills in the lane. Not only are SK's bot lane using their huge lane lead to invade with their jungler to secure objectives like the enemy red, but they can use this pressure to create multiple kill opportunities once Sejuani is forced out. Even without taking the bot lane tower, Lucian knows exactly where to be to create the most impact. Before Dragon spawns, he makes sure to be in mid in order to create as much pressure as possible, which means that even though his team can't contest this Dragon, they're able to have a lot of map pressure in order to heavily damage mid tower and take top tower too. ADC is often just treated as the wrecking ball of the team. If there are structures or objectives to take, you're going to be the person that does the most damage to them. It's imperative that you start trying to read the map and put yourself in the lane that will provide the most impact for the team. Especially if you manage to break bottom tower, you really get to start moving all over the map and using the numbers advantage that you can create to its full effect. Getting better at this level of play is just really difficult, which is why we need to start seeking out any small advantage we can possibly get. We briefly talked about breaking the rules before, but now we need to start taking everything we've learned and experimenting with anything we can imagine to get a lead. Hitting plates that cost you a bit of tempo? Maybe. Giving up CS to take a trade in order to prep for a dive? Sure. Flanking in team fights? Also potentially. There are a ton of situations that sound awful on paper, but in practice can work because of factors that are going to depend on each individual game. Once you know the rules, you can start bending them to your liking and really try to push your limits. The best way of learning this is to start watching the best of the best. Put on VODs of pro players and try to predict what they're going to do next. If they choose to play a situation in a way that makes no sense to you right now, just try to understand their thought process. At this level, tiny advantages swing games, and finding the 1% play is what's going to let you push yourself to challenger. Every game is going to require a different solution, and no rule is going to hold up 100% of the time anymore. It's not enough to be generally a positive force. You might have to find the absolute best play in order to win these close games. When it comes down to it, League is a hard game. I think we all know that. And while this advice is a blanket statement for players to improve, only you or a coach is going to directly find which areas are weakest and help you improve the most. These are just what I found to be the biggest holes in players' gameplay over my thousands of hours coaching, and hopefully it helped you to highlight an area that you might be lacking in. If I had any advice to players looking to improve though, it would be to practice with intent. We are all capable of sitting down and mindlessly queuing up games, but if we're not actually learning anything from those games, it's not really worth it. You're going to benefit much more from one game where you are fully engaged, alert, and in a good headspace than 5 games where you're tilted, watching Netflix on your second monitor, and not really asking how you could improve. Take your time and take breaks between games. Spend time to reflect and internalize an issue that going into the next game you want to actively fix. Set goals for what you want to learn and execute, and you'll have a much faster track to improving than people that put in more hours actually playing the game than you do. And remember, if you want to improve fast and get the rank you've always wanted, then check out skillcap.com. It's completely risk-free to try it out, as you're kept safe with rank up insurance. If you don't significantly improve while actively using Skillcap, then you get your money back, no questions asked. Check us out with the link in the description below and get the rank you've always wanted. We here at Skillcap want to thank you for watching. Good luck on your climb, and from everyone here, we hope you have a great day.